Welcome to Week in One. I'm Fundo Mabalan. It moves at lightning pace, so chances are that you may have missed some of the news this week. Now, let me bring you up to speed with some of those top news stories and interviews that featured on eNCA this week. Now, this week's top stories: the Marikana massacre commemoration ceremony remembers the fallen. A video of police beating an unarmed man goes viral. And the Supreme Court of Appeal sits regarding former President Jacob Zuma's medical parole. A video has gone viral on social media that shows two police officers allegedly beating a man repeatedly with a baton. The Independent Police Investigative Directorate is currently probing the incident that shocked the community of Fish Hoek in the Western Cape. eNCA senior reporter Aisha Ismail compiled this report.
Stop it! Stop it!
The man in the video being beaten is 28-year-old Joel Gaffley from Fish Hoek.
I was trying to report a missing persons case for my girlfriend who had gone missing for roughly 16 hours. And so I wanted the police to help me with that, and they were not being very helpful, and they were actually laughing at me because I couldn't tell them the exact address of my girlfriend's place, and they were giving me a hard time. And yeah, I was being very unassistant, and after I asked them for help a good few times. And yeah, I basically told them that you're trying to do as little work as possible, and that you are, swear word, FCKing, useless at your job.
He says he was in the back of the police van to go and file a missing persons report before changing his mind and getting out.
It turned into a bit of a wrestle kind of thing, and the passenger just started clobbering me on the leg with his baton, and did so 20, 25 times, and in the same spots, and that's why I've got my gashes and bruises. And
he says he was then handcuffed and thrown in the back of the van. Gaffley says he was again beaten at the police station. He was taken for medical treatment, but had to return to holding cells ahead of his first court appearance for assault. Hannah Sanderson says she heard a commotion and then Gaffley calling for help.
I was inside and the gate was locked, and it took me about 4 minutes for me to get outside here. And once I did, there was, two police officers. One was holding him down and the other one was just hitting him relentlessly with a baton.
She said people who drove past the house pleaded with the police to stop, with one threatening to pepper spray police. SAPS and IPID are now entering the fray to investigate the incident.
Investigations are ongoing. We were able to get hold of every individual who will assist this case to go forward. We also collected evidence and we are proceeding with our investigations.
No reasoning for hitting a man on the ground.
Once the investigation is concluded, IPID will make recommendations to SAPS. Aisha Ismail, Cape Town.
A decade has passed since 34 striking mine workers were gunned down by police in Marikana in the northwest. This week, families and union members honored the fallen workers. AMCU President Joseph Mathunjwa was the keynote speaker. eNCA's Moloko Moloto has more.
Thousands packed the vicinity of the Marikana Kopi on Tuesday.
Long live the spirit of Marikana 34, long live!
Widows say they still want President Cyril Ramaphosa to come down to Marikana.
Sinemibuzo ke kuye utata Ramaphosa esifuna ajongane nathi ngobuso ngobuso. Ngoba kaloku akakwazi umuntu akone ogqiba athule iminyaka engaka. Siyibona ingathi ayiselo xolo ngoku. Ngoba uxolo lwakhe ingathi sesulicela ngokwethu ngoku into bamakeze. Into kwakufanele ba uyenzile kwasekuqaleni.
Dali Mpofu, a lawyer for the family, says Ramaphosa and Sibanye Stillwater Mine should fence off the Kopi, erect a tombstone inscribed with the names of the deceased, and apologize to families.
We are always told about 10 people abasweleka before. We've been explaining this. A massacre is the one that happened on the 16th. Kodwa, it does not mean that the lives of the other people were not important. Okwesibini, kwakula 10 kuthethwa ngayo, most yabo yayingabasebenzi, kwenziwa ngathi yayingabantu abathile, kanti yayikwangabantu bethu. In fact, abanye babo abahlolokazi are part of that.
AMCU President Joseph Mathunjwa says the democratic government destroyed what it inherited from the apartheid state.
In as much as the Nationalist Party was cruel
to humanity, but they left us with a functioning state. Where is the railway today? Where is the SAA today?
The Constitution didn't escape Matunjwa's wrath.
Until such time, we tear this Constitution and write our own Constitution that will embrace our culture, that will embrace our norms, that will embrace our values. Because this Constitution has changed us to be like zombies.
AMCU has described the past decade as 10 years of betrayal, no accountability and no justice. Muluku Mulot, Marikana.
Former President Jacob Zuma is challenging a High Court ruling declaring his release on parole unlawful. His defense argued that Zuma needs round-the-clock medical care and that no correctional facility is capable of providing this. eNCA senior reporter Avu Mdila was in court.
The stakes are high for former President Jacob Zuma, who's appealing a December High Court ruling that could see him spend his remaining 13-month sentence behind bars. He was released in September by then Correctional Services Commissioner Arthur Fraser on medical parole, whose counsel here at the Supreme Court of Appeal says that decision was based on merit.
There is not a mention of terminal illness, not a mention of the jurisdictional requirements of the section. And one would expect that and require that, surely.
It might be so, Justice Plaskett, it might be so. But my submission is that the whole report should be read in its totality. It must not be cherry-picked. It must be read in its totality. And if one goes back to 13, one would understand that 79 referred in paragraph 13 makes reference to the issue of the terminal illness without having to say it explicitly.
Representing the former statesman, Advocate Dalimpofu says Zuma needs 24-hour medical care and no correctional facility can cater for him.
The condition of Mr. Zuma required that he be under care of a medic on a 24-hour basis, a situation that was not possible at the facility, as the correctional center can only accommodate inmates overnight. Therefore, the medic could not be allowed to spend 24 hours with Mr. Zuma, as the medic could not be accommodated in the correctional facility.
The Council for the Democratic Alliance stamped the authority of the Medical Parole Advisory Board, saying that the Correctional Services Commissioner needed to go through it in making his decision.
In our submission, on a purposive, effective interpretation of the provision makes it clear that the legislature elevated the purpose and importance of that report over and above the report in 2C, which in any event is only required if it's a sub-Roman 2 scenario, not a sub-Roman 1. That demonstrates with respect that you can have a medical parole application without 2C being complied with. And if that's the case, you can hardly elevate 2C to the same level of importance and centrality to the medical parole scheme as this independent board's report.
As the arguments continue into the evening, the Supreme Court of Appeal is expected to reserve its judgment into this matter. Avi Wem Tila, Bloemfontein.
Stay tuned to Week in One. Coming up, we showcase some of the big interviews on eNCA this week. Do stay tuned. Welcome back to Week in One. I'm Fundo Mabalani. It's been a year since whistleblower Babita Deokaran was brutally killed. This week, Gauteng Premier David Makhura stated that an independent forensic investigator is being appointed to look into new allegations relating to the case. The eNCA's Sally Burdett spoke to investigative journalist at News 24, Jeff Wicks, about this.
Talk to me about your investigation. As you say, the Hawks are also looking at it, but you seem to have come across a lot of information. Are you able to tell us how you were able to access information, what the information is, and in a nutshell, what you found out?
Well, absolutely. So we've been at this for a good couple of months. Myself, along with the team at News 24, have been working through this trove of documents, and that's the basis of our investigation, are these internal Gauteng Department of Health emails that that have now cast light on a scandal which would have otherwise gone unnoticed. What's key in those emails is it plots out a very important timeline. It tells us that Babita Deokaran, a little more than a month before she was killed, first stumbled across this massive surge in payments out of Tembisa Hospital. And when I say surge, I mean hundreds of millions of rands and outstripped much larger facilities in the province. When she looked at where this money was going, and I talk about the companies who are the recipients of these contracts, she found that very few had public presences and some had very obscure names. And then what also raised the alarm, and we've seen it from the correspondence, is that the amount of the payments is crucial. All are between 400 and 500,000 rand. And that's important because that allows procurement to take place at a hospital level. Anything above that threshold requires a much more rigorous procurement process and one that's public.
Have you been able to follow the money?
Well, that's what we're doing, Sally. So over the past 2 weeks, we've exposed 6 individuals who together control 30 companies who are responsible for 90 million rand in transactions out of the hospital in the space of 6 weeks. That is the trail that we're on at the moment. We're trying to follow the
19
money.
million rand in 6 weeks.
Yes. The most recent story we published centered on a married couple, a woman who worked as a part-time call center agent and her husband who was a sound engineer. And through their 10 entities, they billed nearly 30 million rand in under a month.
Is there any way, from what you're seeing, that top officials either at Tembisa Hospital or perhaps even further up the food chain in the Gauteng Department of Health wouldn't have known about this?
Well, we can say conclusively that they all knew about it because Babita Deokaran filed a report on these transactions. She flagged these individual companies and she called for a detailed investigation. What's happened afterwards is probably the most egregious thing, is that when she died, that investigation, or the thought of it, was cast aside. And what the Gauteng Health Department did instead was undertake a randomized compliance audit, where they looked at supply chain management procedures through hospitals all around the province, instead of looking at Tembisa.
As part of our crime focus this week, we look at the impact that new trends are having on South Africans. Crime experts are concerned about property hijacking syndicates that are highly organized and operating across the country. eNCA's Tumelo Mututwane interviewed security specialist Mike Bolhuis on the South African Morning.
Mike, good morning to you. Thank you so much for trying to help us make sense of what's really going on in Gauteng. So why this new trend that we're seeing? Not absolutely new, but I think the stats are even higher when it comes to hijacking. What's going on in Gauteng?
The property, we call it property hijacking, has been going on for quite some time. So any vacant property is at risk. In other words, if you go on holiday and you haven't taken the necessary measures, you can come back and find that somebody is in your property, has hijacked it, has looted, stolen everything, and is operating from there. And doing so because, first of all, the criminals today, they just do anything they can and take advantage of because they can get away with it. The security guards, the police, the communities are many a times very scared. They don't want to get involved. They just stay away, and then that makes these criminals get away literally with murder here.
Yeah.
This is any vacant property. It could be a mine, could be a business, it could be a very expensive home, it could be a normal home in a normal area. Because of poverty and due to the spate of crime in our country, it's taken advantage of.
Mike, what exactly are these criminals looking for in these properties? Because I'm not sure if it's the goods inside, is it the copper wiring, is it just, malice? What exactly are they looking for?
Let me sketch a scenario. They would be on the scout. There would be a front man. We call it a front man. He would find out which property is not looked after. There's nobody in there. The people are on holiday or is trying to sell it and not staying there anymore. And then they would slowly but certainly ease one person in. Once one person is in, a group will gather, either a gang or a lot of poor homeless people, and they will start ripping the place apart, selling everything for money and for food, and just using the roof basically to stay there. But the problem is they stay there and from there commit further crimes. They do further house robberies or commit any and other forms of crimes in a community in an area.
Professor J.J. Tabane dissected the controversial issue of migration in South Africa this week on Power to Truth. He hosted a robust panel discussion with the African Diaspora, Action SA, and the Patriotic Alliance.
You are accusing them directly. Are you saying that they don't have valid points around illegal migration that is a bothersome issue for their constituency?
I think it has gone beyond just an issue of illegal migration.
Yeah.
Because you see,
when you know about that?
Yes.
They always talk about illegal migration.
That's what you hear, people talking about illegal migration.
Yeah.
But when you talk about illegal migration, there are systems, in the country that deals with illegal migration.
Which are failing. There are millions of people who are here who cross the river, the Crocodile River, on the back of crocodiles, and they just slip in through torn fences. Let's be frank.
Then fix the system that is failing rather than to try and deal with the end result.
Surely there is a place for migration in any society. Let's start. That's a starting point.
Here in South Africa, they are not only here illegally. They are opening businesses. They are having jobs. Locals are being shunted. The majority of people prefer them than local people because they don't have unions. They are easy to exploit. My thing is very simple. We need mass deportation. Then we need mass deportation. Don't come and blame the system. The systems are broken. But the fact remains, they are here illegally.
How do we strike the balance between the need for proper and so on immigration, right, and the solution we are proposing of mass deportation that could feed into what we're already seeing, which is really, frankly, equal to vigilantism?
What we do is we live in a democratic dispensation. As South African voters, we have the responsibility as well to vote the governments in, to deliver on our mandate, and when they fail, we remove them. But I think for me, I would never support anyone who wants to take the law into their own hands, because then, like you're saying, where do you stop? I don't want to really be stopped one day by someone saying, Mashaba, you from Mozambique or whatever, where are you? I mean, then, so I think we've got to really be very careful because the criminal elements who are here from Pakistan, from Bangladesh, from everywhere else, they are taking advantage of the weakness in our system because they have a government that has allowed criminality to be the order of the day.
Stay tuned to Week in One. Coming up, we take a look back at the instigator saga a year later. Do stay tuned. Welcome back to Week in One. I'm Fundo Mabalani. Now, it's been a year since violent riots and looting shook KwaZulu-Natal and Gauteng, leaving over 300 people dead and billions of rand in losses to the economy. Police are still making arrests of dozens of people who apparently planned the unrest. The latest arrests follow sharp criticism of people initially brought to court on charges of inciting public violence, with many asking if they were the real instigators. Govind Whittles compiled this report.
The Patriotic Alliance's West Rand leader Bruce Nimmerod was the first to be arrested after police identified him as the person behind a voice note telling people to block roads. But Nimmerod insisted that this was not his voice, and his party sprung to his defense.
It is not a political party now that says, no, because he's our leader, we don't believe that that's his voice note. No, it is factual that the voice note that they claim is the voice of leader Nimrod is not true.
Then the self-styled KZN politician Ngizwe Mqunu was arrested after he was allegedly linked to igniting the unrest. Outside court, he accused the police of conspiring against him and another alleged instigator.
I'm out today because of the justice system. If it was the wish for people who arrested us, we shouldn't be here. Even Bonkosi today should be rotting in jail so that they can cruise, control, and loot the whole country.
Despite these arrests, the Hawks were under pressure to act against Twitter users who were seen to be inciting the violence. One of these was the woman behind the Spiti Piti Evaluator account, but the charges against her were eventually withdrawn. Soon after this, the police minister raised expectations, saying dozens more people would be arrested.
The DPCI is putting eye on 86 more people on this matter. But there are 19 that will be regarded as instigators. 8 are arrested by DPCI, which are hawks. And 11 are arrested by the detective team that was put together there. So there are 19, they remain as 19. 2 of them cases have been withdrawn, and almost all of them, they are on bail. Once you are on bail, which means there is a case to answer.
And it seems the hawks are under pressure to act against former President Jacob Zuma's daughter, Duduzile, who posted this tweet anticipating her own arrest. All eyes are now on the hawks to see if they will follow through. Govin Whittles, Johannesburg.
So every year, Eskom loses billions of rands to illegal connections and cable theft. Cape Town city officials say that this has forced it to cut off illegal connections because it overloads the network and causes extended outages. Senior reporter Aisha Ishmael reports.
In the last 4 months alone, Eskom has spent more than 25 million rand in the Western Cape to repair and replace vandalized Eskom property. And as land grabs and informal settlements increase, so too does the theft of power. Kraaifontein has suffered chronic power outages over the past 2 months, and residents are not pleased.
When we checked, we found that they are impacted by high volumes of illegal connections, impacting or related faults in the area.
She says they realized electricity meant for homes in the area was being illegally connected to supply informal settlements.
Just to give you an example of what is happening, just behind me here, you can see the source with the black big cable that is coming onto that pole with the grey box. 3 of the black cables are supposed to go into 3 houses, but because of the illegal connections, because of the informal settlements at the back, you can see the spider web that's connected there, now powering more than 3 houses. I'm losing count of how many houses are connected there. And if this continues, eventually you will expect an explosion that will occur on that grey box. And when that happens, our paying customers are going to be experiencing extended outages.
Oluba says Eskom relies on SAPS and the City of Cape Town's law enforcement officers for protection. Staff are often targeted by criminals and angry communities as they carry out maintenance work and disconnections. But she says they have no choice but to stop the illegal connections to prevent injuries and further revenue losses. Aisha Ismail, Cape Town.
Shocking revelations emerged in the Tasneem van Wyk murder trial this week. The man on trial for the rape, kidnapping and murder of the 8-year-old testified that he and van Wyk were forced into a bakkie and driven to Worcester. Mukhadeen Pangaka says 4 people who helped with directions are behind her murder. eNCA's Nobesuthu Ejana reports.
On day 3 of his testimony, Mukhadeen Pangaka has told the court that he and 8-year-old Tasneem van Wyk were somehow abducted by the 4 passengers who had previously asked for directions to the Malawi camp in Ravensmith. That's the day van Wyk went missing. He went on to say that after struggling to find a lift near the N1 garage to return back to Cape Town, but to his surprise, the people who dropped them off at the garage reappeared and were now driving a bakkie where they made several turns between Worcester and Laingsburg. And that will be the last time he sees van Wyk alive.
They grabbed his no worry. Then I was worried. I was worried now. Then I asked, what are you going to do now? Say what his name is. The lady, okay? Not so terrible. But then she said, but this is not your trouble. He came back. In again in a vehicle again. And then he proceeded on.
Pangaka says after he was assaulted by the people, they then dropped him off on the side of the road, but he could not tell anyone he met about what happened, as he feared that he would be held responsible for what happened.
You said you're bang, you're scared that people is going to blame you. Going to blame you for what?
Waarvoor gaat die mensen voor je blameren? Because you don't know what happened to Tasneem. You can say that I can't tell, I can't account to anyone.
Nobesutu Ejana, Cape Town.
And that brings this week's edition of Week in One to a close. From me, Mfundo Mabalani, and the Week in One team, have a great weekend.